Testing.
That's what I'm saying. It's a little overkill.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025, and we will start the budget workshop at 5:33 p.m.
So good evening, everyone. I'm going to work through some documents today and really do an overview. But I think the more, I don't know if it's exciting or interesting component between increase in subsidy, our special ed team doing a great job with working through reimbursements, and really being incredibly frugal, I'll use the word, in our budget. Our initial proposed budget is coming in at a local increase of 3.44%. We had worked hard to get to 4%, and we're going to continue to work at what we have. As you know, throughout the process, there's sometimes things that we find. Those could be to the good, to the challenge, and we'll work through those as they come. So I'm going to kick off things with, I know we all have a binder. So the first page is a table of contents. We do have these available here in the room if members of the public would like to look through them. I'll start with my budget memo, and I have some slides, and we'll just work through questions that you may have. So going to that first tab, it's memo and reference material. So I try not to do this too often, but I am going to read to you today. So here we go. We're about to engage in public budget process. We invite community stakeholders, students, parents, and community partners, taxpayers, and others who have vested interest in our schools to join us, invite us into community spaces to ask questions, share what you support, and make your thoughts known. As you know, we've done some listening sessions, and those have been good, and we're available to try to schedule more if community members would like to do so. Just a bit of history. I think everybody in the room knows that last year we went through 3 different referendums to get the budget passed in July, which I think taught us a lot. We learned a lot. We learned a lot about, I think, a common theme of people support our schools, a common theme of people want good things for our kids, a common theme that we want to get better with teaching and learning and outcomes, but also a concern that the burden on taxpayers is great. And so we looked for ways this year to come in and more responsibly according to that message. I will say, I don't know how many times, that the referendum this year will be held on May 13th, and we encourage people to get out to vote. The version of this budget for the next school year that will be presented to the school committee and into our community is the most conservative budget I believe we can put forward without breaking our oaths and commitments to kids. This budget proposal does not do what we would like to, but we are aware of the financial strain on local taxpayers, and we had to make some tough decisions. I feel this budget could be supported as presented. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. There's certainly a lot of process and a lot of detail to review, and we're ready to do that. But this number is as conservative as I believe we can bring forward and still maintain our responsibilities. And to do this, we've maintained the commitments of our contractual obligations. We've kept all non-staff lines flat or reduced, except for a handful of items that were up as actuals that really weren't negotiable, like electricity. But other areas are, for the most part, flat or reduced. 2 areas of addition. So sometimes we come to you with things that we're asking for in multiple places. There are only 2 areas this year that we're asking for increases other than those actuals, and that's career and technical education, or LRTC, or the trades in business and all those programs. And that is strictly based on increased subsidy, which is directly connect to Director Callahan's work and many others to grow the amount of programs we have available, which grew the subsidy. And so when you see increases in that area, please know that it is backed by two things, actually. One is subsidy. And as this committee knows and has supported, we have worked with the other 5 area schools that are connected to the technical center to have them contribute, because we have the second site, which has some different costs. And all those schools in our region have agreed to do so. And we'll continue to work through that process with a final number where they contribute to anything in excess of the subsidy. Also, special education program growth, but again, focusing on cost deflection. We will spend one night coming up just on special education and really diving in deep with that. But I will throw all the kudos I can towards the climb team and everyone who's helped make that climb effort happen over at McMahon. And we will talk about actual savings, actual reimbursements, and get really into the nitty gritty. But we do, as part of a multi-year plan, want to continue to expand those kinds of offerings and make sure our programs that they exist, we can continue to staff them better and well, and make sure that we are filling those seats and bringing kids back home. Yes, there's a financial motive, but there's also a lot of good benefits to kids being in their own community, and that's important to us. We've also worked hard to maximize our efforts for subsidy and other funding, including reimbursements and reduce use of fund balance by almost $2 million down to $3,450,000. Again, that's that unexpended fund piece, that's that dwindling amount that we continue to be concerned about, and making sure that we are reaching a target that is responsible so that we don't run into a cliff the following year. This 3.45, I think, is a very good step to reduce the usage by, again, almost $2 million. It's responsible. I'd like to keep that there or lower if we can find a way to do so. Meet our goal of coming to the budget process. I know I made a bold statement a while back during a joint meeting that we were going to try to come in at 4%, and that was before we knew 4% on the local. I mean, that was before we knew a lot of details on subsidy and other specs. But again, through good work of the team, we've been able to do that. As presented, again, it's a 3.44% or 46-cent increase locally, which moves the mill rate projection to $13.79. We work closely with, and we're also very thankful for, and I want to keep saying publicly, the delegation that we have that represents Lewiston has fought like crazy for us with legislation, with funding, you name it. They've been good partners. They've been reaching out. They've been communicating, and that's very helpful. And I think that helps stimulate things like improved subsidy. We continue to monitor federal funding. Those conversations are pretty dynamic right now. We have shared with you prior to today, based on a question that was asked in a follow-up, information about federally funded positions and those dollars in our community. The vast majority of the work that we do with anything federally funded is connected to title work, which is congressionally approved work. So we still need to wait and see, but as of right now, we feel like short of acts of Congress, literally, and or legal action, those programs for now seem like they will stay whole. But I say that with all the grains of salt and caveat that I can, because we really can't predict that future. This budget does include support for staff to help with continued growth, certifications and progress towards certification, instructional improvement, after-school programs that we currently have, summer programming that we would like to support, and certainly a focus on student learning. We'll review a lot of material and hear from members of leadership during workshops. We did host the town hall meeting recently that was recorded and is being translated. I actually got a message in my inbox today that those are prepared, and we'll share those files out publicly if anyone wants to listen and hear the Q&A and the different components. And again, the offer to chime in on the process remains. We welcome the public at the workshops and also ask that people get out to vote. The next item we have in our binder is our budget schedule. So if you can recall from last year, I think there was consensus around the table from all of you and us included, that we wanted to do a better job tracking things meeting to meeting so that we had a good sense of what changes were made when. So we've shifted our structure to include meeting numbers. I think that will help us as far as note keeping and tracking things should we have a situation similar to last year where dynamic changes are being made in short time frames so that we can have referendums with the right notice. So you see a chart here on the table that shows meetings 1, 2, 3, what have you, and the dates. Please note to you, but also to members of the public, on Wednesdays, we are often here because the Green Ladle is prepared for their restaurant days in the spring. And they set up that space for that or use that space to set up their restaurant. And Mondays, we are back at the Green Ladle for our typical meetings. And we'll try to remind you and give you advance notice of those pieces. Next tab, we have the fiscal year 26 revenue and ED 279 sheet. I'm gonna try to put this up if I can get the size right. I'm just trying to share this. 1 second. So there's a whole lot of numbers here. Certainly happy to go through them piece by piece in more detail as we go. But from an overview perspective, there are some key numbers here as you're looking through. If we walk down, we're hitting some of the detail that our overall subsidy is up by $7.3 million. CTE funds are up that 450,000 in subsidies. So that will be those ads that I mentioned. As we move down, you see a lot of red things in brackets. Those are, of course, reductions. Some of those are connected to things like debt service, which just happens over the lifespan of what we're paying off. And I think a big piece to me that we really want to harp on is just below the middle of the page where you see fund balance use being, again, $1.995 million less than last year as far as how it ended up. Below that, you have some adult education costs. Please note that there was a reduction in their subsidy of 34,000. They have a 2-year cycle on their reimbursement and subsidy matrix. They have looked for ways to use they have their own fund balance, which is separate of the general fund balance. They've looked for cost savings and also use of fund balance, but they have come in responsibly as not asking for more. If we look at going down further, you can see the totals for the grand total revenue. A reminder, this is money we anticipate coming into the district, but that balances out with what our expenditures are that we'll go through in detail. And that's at 118,078, 731. And when you do the math behind the scenes based on the valuation, when we look at things like $150,000 home, this would be a 46-cent increase on the mill rate. And it would cost someone with a home valuation of $150,000, $68.83 of an increase from last year to this year if adopted as proposed. Any questions about the revenue sheet for now? We can certainly dive into that in more detail down the road. The next document is the famous ED 279, which I know you're all familiar with from work we've done in the past. And a lot of dynamic pieces there. And just a reminder, we've been trying to work with the legislature to increase the economically disadvantaged ratios. So if that does in fact occur, that may benefit Lewiston. If it doesn't occur or retracts, we could look at a loss of subsidy from one year to the next, which you all have lived a couple years ago when we were over $1 million short in our subsidy, which made for a very challenging budget process. The next page is just a breakdown of, excuse me, the next section is just a breakdown of the budget articles. And then it starts to get into the articles themselves. Is there anyone that wants to go through the articles quickly with just a quick descriptor, or do you feel comfortable at this point? We'll certainly go through it with detail on numbers. Okay. Yeah, I can do some recap things for sure. And then after that, if you look at your tabs, they look different because they're numbered, but they're numbered to reflect the article that we would be referencing. I think last year, a lesson learned was, that's tab number 12, but really we're talking about Article 4. And so it created this kind of mental mapping confusion. So we have tabbed those articles by number, so you can see them and access them there. We shared a number of items with you and the public in the packet that might also be used as a reference. And I just want to jump to my slideshow for a few minutes, if I could, to talk about a little bit of how we landed to where we are today and a little more information. Some of this is familiar to you, but I know we want to be able to recap every year. Budget process for us begins in December. We start thinking about it before, but it really starts to begin in December. And typically year to year, we talk about what we think we might be able to do. This year's direction was pretty clear from me and our team that we were going to have some limited funding opportunities. So I think people did their work reflective of that. Feedbacks, again, is just mixed, but mostly that we need to bring a financially conservative budget forward, which have done for you. We mentioned the 3 referendums, and we're hopeful that people will participate May 13th in the vote. Just as a refresher for many of the members who've done this now multiple times, the initial version, or what you have in front of you in the binder, is considered the superintendent's budget. So this is what I'm bringing to you, and then you will do the work you do with lots of inputs. And then that next version that we will present to the city council will become the school committee budget. And then if adopted by the city council, that becomes the city council level school budget, which again, once adopted, moves forward to referendum, which this year is scheduled for May 13th. And then if the referendum is passed, or at which point it is passed, if there are any changes, whatever is passed in that referendum becomes the fiscal year 26 budget. I always try to remind people of some themes and goals. We continue to work at this and try to ground our thinking in these pieces. They are not prioritized. I think they're all important, but school safety, improving our special education structure to improve programming, grow pathways for graduation, maintain equity, social, emotional, and coping skills development efforts, improve instruction and learning systemically, and stability and communication. EPS, which we discussed, again, we can go through in greater detail, but that is the document by which we have our initial subsidy. In this particular year, we do have an ED 279, which is that document. What we don't yet have is a governor's approved budget. And so some of this could fluctuate over time. We're hopeful that there aren't fluctuations from a school-based perspective, and we are hopeful that there are certainly no reductions. But if there are, we will react accordingly. It's a lot of factors, as you know, that go into the budget, and things to consider. As of right now, the state of Maine subsidy formula has increased. We talked about CTE program expanding because of the availability of subsidy, and the goal of reducing our use of fund balance. I'll say that a lot. It's a real fear of mine as the lead fiscal agent of public schools. if we continue to use too much fund balance, we will meet the day that we have to find millions of dollars that we don't have. And again, we want support, but also have a budget that centers on the needs of our kids. Just some reminders that over the last 2 budget cycles, we've cut 91 positions from the budget, many of them vacant. And especially in the first year when we cut 61, many of them were not just vacant, but seemed like a good audit of some duplication that we finally were able to get organized and cleaned up with the help of our different teams. Mentioned again, having success with Climb, and we'll talk in great detail about that. There are some contractual increases. I think Susanna and I have been communicating a lot of today, but she had mentioned that our HR director, that there's been 12 different negotiations components in the recent window of time. That's a big lift. But when we have contractual increases, we have to meet those. There are challenges with inflation, and I say that not because we included that in this budget, but that anything we left flat is really inflation short, if that makes sense. So if inflation doesn't contract back, we're looking at doing the same or more with not just less, but inflation perspective less. Healthcare costs will be a big theme as we talk about this, because we got a message recently, which I shared with you, but also for the public. We get a notice from the insurance, I don't know what to call that entity, but the trust, if you will, on what might we see for increases to our health insurance. We have typically budgeted around 10 or 12% based on what we know, what we think we know. And we've had years where it's come in much less than that. And if that happens, great. But we've had years, we have not had years, at least recently, but other school systems have had years where it jumps significantly and it makes it very challenging. Talk more about how that might impact us, but the letter stated that we budgeted 10%, 10 or 12, that we budgeted 10. We budgeted 10% for healthcare increases in the budget, and we got a notice that not us necessarily, but in some way, shape, or form, this matrix is going to try to conquer a 17.89% increase in insurance. We are not their only client, obviously, but if we have that happen, we are aware of some numbers, and we'll have to be mindful of impacts that will have. I'll share more about that in a minute. Space continues to be a concern, as you know, and we continue to look at ways we can offset space programmatically and or space-wise, space concerns, programmatically, or with additional space use at places like 287 Main Street. But we're also looking for ways to do that at a minimal cost to our local tax base. And multi-year planning is underway. I know a number of people have asked about that, but we are in a place where we think we can start doing some projections and give you some multi-year components. It wouldn't be this level of detail like you have in front of you, but I think we can throw you some ballpark numbers based on percentages, based on the things that we would like to do over the next few years. So the total current budget is 117, 177, 091. I know I said 118 earlier. That's a reflection of additional costs from in the revenue from adult education. And again, 3.44% increase locally. If you look up at the slide, it says the 1% increase decrease the overall budget. So sometimes we talk about like what's a penny, what's a percent. So 1% is $1,096,000 roughly, and a 1% increase or decrease to the local tax base equates to $300,000. The snapshot of just some budget drivers: our salaries have increased by 9%. Those are contractual. That equates to $5.4 million. And if you look at comparison from 25 to 26, you can see that change reflected, with the note that some of that cost increase is based on our commitment to our special purpose in-district programming. And so of the money we've saved or deflected by having our kids here, that we can also get reimbursement for in many ways, we have also had to spend money on facilities to get it ready. We've also had to spend money on staff, which is reflective in that bottom number. But if we didn't have those, which remember are kind of in that category of were new to us last year, even though we made the financial commitment, they weren't actualized as people. It would actually bring our salary increases overall to 6%. So wanted to separate those two things for you that, yes, there are contractual increases, but a chunk of the increase in staff cost is based on that new programming and staffing. We've talked a lot about the paid family medical leave contribution. That for us this year, for the public school side of things in the budget, is reflected up there in that number of $282,426. And then from a insurance increase, again, that FY 25 to 26, you can see that adjustment of the $1.578 million. But all the other items, excluding salary and benefits, were increased by a combined 1% or $390,000. So if you look at FY 25 at 33.9 and FY 26 at 34.2, when you talk about an organization this size, that's not just lean, that is beyond lean. So just want to be sharing that. And I think I'm trying to say it that way in that I think that there some message from some people in our community have been, doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to fail the budget. And while that saddens me for kids, I think if we come in with something like this, or we're talking about a 1% type change, it's pretty tough to just say, I'm going to fail that budget. That's extremely conservative. I'm going to talk tonight a little bit about the organizational chart. Kudos to our HR department, who has not just created an organizational chart, but has cross-referenced it with employees we have, number of vacancies, who reports to whom, and then try to plot it in a visual way. We are still making some corrections. Management looked at it yesterday, and the corrections are not in actuals, if you will. They're more of, actually, that person belongs over here because they report to there. So there's some small tweaks, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. Before we dive into that too far, just want to remind people that we currently operate with 12 facilities, including McMahon, Montello, Geiger, Connors, Farwell Middle School, High School, our technical center, which exists, well, in two sites that we really have, really from a budgetary perspective, thoughts about, but really it's 3, if not 4, because we have obviously sites here in Lewiston. We have satellite classrooms and oversight in Auburn at the new EL. We have students participating in programs with oversight at Central Maine Community College. And of course, we have the Culinary Arts Center, the Green Ladle, which is across the parking lot here. So I left it as 2 sites in the Green Ladle, but just note that there's multiple facilities involved there. Longley, of course, as you know, which is still very much having busy days. The Dingley Building and 287 Main Street. As of very recently, I'm kind of looking to my left, my fact checkers. We have 1,485 total staff, but that includes part-time roles such as athletic coaches or advisors or substitutes and things like that. And as of recent, again, 1,111, not a typo, just coincidence, full-time staff. And when we get into the organizational chart, you'll start to see how that breaks out from a perspective of why so many staff. But when you think about moving kids to and from, maintaining facilities, feeding kids, cleaning up after kids, specialized services, and other things, it starts to compile pretty quickly. So I'm going to stop my share and jump to organizational charts. Any questions on what I've shared so far? Yeah.
Does that number of staff also include transportation through Hudson? Because they're not actually LPS employees. Would that be more?
Correct. Those folks are not on this list, and I'm pulling from my memory here. I think they operate somewhere between 120 and 130 staff. But that's my best recollection.
Do we know how we line with other districts? I mean, we are the second largest district from Portland, is that correct? And do we know, by what percent?
Comparing to other districts by percent of,
Yeah, like our understanding is that Lewiston is the second largest school district in the state. And we're second to Portland. And do we know their ratios as far as students and staff and things like that? We don't have that information.
I don't have that information. I don't know that that's a publicly shared thing. We can try to ask. I'll say this, that the Portland Public Schools budget that was approved last year was, I believe, closer to $16 million larger than ours last year. And I think they're projecting a growth this year, from what I've heard. And the difference in numbers of students, I think, is somewhere around 300. Yeah, it's the difference between us and Portland is very small. We actually, as we look at things like the apartment buildings or what have you, may exceed Portland's enrollment in the next couple of years. It's certainly possible. And we operate on $15+ million less.
Right. And they have a much huger tax base than we ever could think of.
Just a quick search. It looks like on their website, it says they have 1,300 educators and other staff members. I don't have the students, but that was a quick Google search.
Just because it's coming from, the Portland unveiled a $171 million budget proposal this week. Last night, sorry. But we are not Portland. I want to be clear about that. I do think that but I do think it's an interesting set of numbers to be thinking about with in many aspects, we're doing a lot of very good things with less people, less resources. All right, I'm going to share this. The hard thing with the organizational charts, you kind of want to be able to zoom in and out. And I'm going to try to do this in a way that I don't have to jump back and forth 10 times, but I don't think I'm going to have a choice. So if we go in a sequence and we think about an organizational chart starting essentially with me, this first chart represents the superintendent. And so I'm gonna do the Zoom piece with this, but if you see here, come on, slide with me. So you have the school committee here at the top. I don't know why that's there. I've already got the school committee members here at the top, who are my oversight. And then to the side, you have the assistant superintendent. And then under that, you have some departments here. And so if you look at the kind of the organization of this, when you see that diamond shape, think of supervisory type positions and someone who oversees different areas of our school system. And then it kind of goes down to another grade where you have more of the blocks and then the bubbles. And so it's intentional in its order and its color sequence. And again, we're still making sure that this is all what we want. But if you look at this initially, so you can see like I work closely with Cheryl, obviously, as my executive assistant. And then it starts to go outward from there. And if you see the side here, we try to make note of all the principals. So that all funnels back up. And so what we did for design purposes, there's no way you could fit this on a piece of paper or canvas that's movable or printable unless you use online softwares. But we broke that out. So if you want a school, you can go to a school. And so I'll go through some of these so you can see them. But we shared the files with you, and as they get updated, we will share the updated versions. But I know the organizational chart is something that people have been looking for. I think we need a couple of days, probably by the end of the week, I would say that we can put these up online with no hesitation. The only reason I say not today is because we shared it with management yesterday and there were a few anomalies that were found and they're making those corrections like I mentioned earlier. And if you look further at this, you can see human resources, the HR team and the assistant HR director. You have the facilities director and reporting staff. But then what this doesn't show is like which school has which pieces. But what you can see, I'm going to zoom in here again on facilities. When you look at this, if you review the numbers, you can see 1 of 1. That's just the number of folks that we have and how many are, excuse me, the first number is how many are filled and the next number is how many we have. So if you go down to custodian services, 30 of 40, it means 30 of the 40 available custodian positions have been filled. And we're trying to work on this in a way that those things get updated on a frequency so that we can pull them more regularly for accuracy. Sliding across, you see the controller and the business office and payroll. That's the area where like Adam works, and then other members of the business office, and then the teaching and learning components there. It's going to open up a different one here.
While we have a moment, could I just say that whoever makes this for the website should label them with what they are, because it just says principal one, principal one, principal one in each of the schools. You don't know which school is which.
So
So the title-
the
the-
files are titled online,
Yes,
so it
but
will say,
inside you don't have the
oh,
name.
I see, on the
So
document
just
itself.
when you're doing this,
Okay.
updating it for the public, it would be good to do that too.
I see what you're saying. Right, because it's on the name, but not, yeah, yeah. Sorry, there's just a few steps to this to try to get it to open in a format that will also zoom and be friendly. And so in this one, you see the assistant superintendent, and then you start to see how this expands outward from the boxes that had more of a heading in them earlier. So you see like multilingual services, Office of Data, Student Information Systems, grants, technology, special education, and the different folks there. And again, you can start to see which pieces under which areas. These aren't all perfectly clear. For example, like Assistant Director of Special Education, I wouldn't say that they only do this piece or that piece. There's often crossover, but to make it clean on a piece of paper, we just tried to stick with a format that made sense. So these are all just the areas of things for Assistant Superintendent or for Karen. And I'll jump to a school. Is there a particular school someone would like to see? McMahon, okay. Sorry, I jumped out of it because I saw superintendent. I was like, that's the wrong one. It's so this shows how those things, different positions feed into which areas. So you do see the principal 101, and we can work on getting a title on these. It is in the file name, but not on the actual sheet. We can add that. And here you see, so kind of off of the principal, you have, your admin assistant. These are the folks that help run the school on the front end, principal clerk, language facilitators that we have around the district, head custodian, other custodians, food service manager, food service staff, and then we have the technology components. And then you can see how we tried to break this down so people could see where things were from. And so CPEs are certified professional educators. So this would be the areas of teachers. And then you see below that ed techs. And then in here, you see a whole range of things from school counselors, interventionists, coaches, school nurse. And when you see things like title, what we didn't do on this particular version was try to disaggregate what things were funded by which places, but things that were that existed in the school, so people could see a true organizational chart. Then you see things like STEM, art, music, band, strings, things of that nature that we have for enrichment. And we have MTSS coordinator, someone who works with interventions. That's Sammy over at, so that if you know Sammy, that's what Sammy does over at McMahon. She does a great job. And then you can see special education, certified professional educators there and their ed techs. And there's also some special education, non-educational staff. So all of those folks live and work at McMahon. And we do have kind of that offshoot from McMahon of the climb staff. So we have that built out too.
That's separate from this.
Separate of this. Yeah.
Just like a clarifying question, so where McMahon has climb, does Charlotte oversee, like, is Charlotte because she's the principal, she oversees that, or does Climb have their own director or principal or assistant principal that oversees that? Like, I'm just thinking, we're looking to potentially add some of these programming into our other schools. McMahon's lucky right now that our numbers are a little bit lower, but if we end up finding space to add this sort of programming into a building whose numbers aren't, a little bit lower, are we adding more on to our principals than, I'm just asking, like, as a clarifying question.
No, I think it's a great question. So right now we have two folks who are working very closely with Charlotte to lead that effort. Their director level roles at this point in time, as the program continues to expand, we're probably gonna have to talk about what their role is and how that might shift. But we believe in this model being successful if we staff it well and do it right. And I think Climb has been successful because we've been focusing on that. And again, it's not inexpensive, but we're saving dollars. So as we look at expansion, either there or elsewhere or down the road even further, yes, it will have specific leadership tied to it. They'll always work in collaboration with the existing principal or that leadership and the services that cross over, like nurse and unified arts and PE and all those things. So there's still that inclusion piece where possible. So there's definitely some overlap. But it's a good question because they do, between their intake and transition plans and specialized needs of their kids, we have to have people that are specifically working with those students that also lead the educators that are working with the students. Yep. And Climb does have its own page of information. So another school or a question about any of the organizational charts?
Yeah, I was hoping you could show us the middle school and the high school. I'm just curious about where the dean of students are on this chart.
All right, so here we have the middle school, and as far as where the deans are located, so we slide through, again, on the left, you see the support staff, and then the general ed CPEs, the various enrichments. Remember, some of the middle school requirements shift in law for what things need to provide. And then you see under student support, the deans of students are listed right here. Those are certified professional educator roles in our district. This one, you can see that one is Title I funded and one is general budget. So one of those lives in your binder and the other one lives in federal dollars. And then if you slide across, you can see again, similar format of special education CPEs and ed techs and the special education non-educational staff. And then you see the leadership up at the top. Yeah.
Is there a reason one is Title I and one is not?
Yeah, we can't afford both locally. That's my real answer.
So my other question is why not put both of them into Title I and
'Cause it-
have no local ask?
Because it's illegal to supplant things from one budget into federal funding.
How did one get into Title I funding to begin with?
It didn't exist. We added it through title funds through the school planning process in their school improvement plan. So they could have further support for students, which was in all of these plans with title funds and other support plans, we have to submit plans and then they have to be approved and the funding has to all work out. So that's how that second dean was found at the middle school. It started connected to ESSER funds. Coming out of COVID, the ESSER funds had different rules, which allowed for that to be funded through title funds when ESSER expired. However, we can't move things from the local to title directly to save money locally. It's considered supplanting.
Right. No, I understand that part of it, but I'm just saying, like, if there was a process to get one approved as Title I, is there a process to get two? I'm just asking, you know what I mean? So the general public knows, like, why are we funding generally one, but one is getting funded federally?
So from just a sheer transaction like perspective, if we took one of these deans that's not in Title I and said, we're just going to put it in Title I, we're in violation of the funding laws.
Can they apply for?
So that's what I'm saying. You said there was a process that you had to follow to get one of them into Title I funds.
To add a second one. So you can't move one that exists from a general fund into title funds. You can
Okay.
add, you can do new. So like, let's say you said, I want to have 3 at the middle school. We could try to explore title funds. There's no room in there to add right now. But that's how that could happen if it's new in addition to. Yeah.
So you could potentially add a third through title funds and then eliminate the one in the general fund?
No, because
Okay.
the grant folks oversee these pieces and they would see that's a flag that pops up right away for them. Creatively, you could look at like a 2-year window where one is reduced in the budget and then you don't have it and then demonstrate a need for it and then get additional federal dollars, which I don't anticipate, and then have it fit in that budget and then get the state to approve it as part of your plan and then try to add it. But no, we can't just move those pieces in the mechanisms, if you will. I got my hand slapped for that a few years back. Did you want to see high school too, or does that platform? But I have no problem pulling up whatever you want to see. Okay, it's loading. I'll share it right now. All right, so this is the high school, and then in this one, you can see again, the support staff on the left. Just a reminder that the high school population is somewhere over around 1,600 kids currently located on that site. High school numbers are a little bigger, but we have kids at other sites. So you see more support staff, obviously. You also see things over here that some schools don't have, like Air Force for the JROTC program. Those don't land as CPEs. This is another nice thing I think HR did when they created this is you can see the positions that belong in different categories. But like, for example, JROTC, which is a program we support, we actually pay their military salary and they're not certified professional educators. So that's why they land over on that side of this category. And then you see the general ed CPEs, and then of course enrichment, a lot of pathways for kids at the high school, and those are needed. You see another area that you don't see everywhere in this way, but librarian and different supports for library. Here's your deans right here as student support. Special education, non-special ed, and again, the special ed tech. So try to keep that similar format for things. And again, if we put every single one, like for example, if I go to general ed, certified professional educators, let's zoom in here so it's more visible. If you look at this, you'll see English teachers, 14 of 14. So just to get it on a page, it made sense to do it this way. But if you look at from one school to another, they're pretty similar in look until you get into the numbers. So certainly the staff at the high school is much larger than staff at other schools because of required pathways, required certifications, and its sheer size and volume of enrollment. Yeah, four PE teachers. They also teach health classes. They do both, and both are required. Sorry, for those on my, the question was, is there 4 gym teachers? And the answer is yes, there are 4 gym teachers that also teach health. And some other classes as electives. Any other schools or, again, we'll share all these out and they're available for everyone to look at. And the 12 clicks to get back to my slideshow and share it. From a budget overview perspective, I'm happy to answer any questions. Our next meeting is Monday, where we really start diving in, but we wanted you to have your binders so you can start looking at things, so you can examine them and look at questions you have. We're looking next week if you want to do a preview and look through different tabs. A budget presentation on Articles 1, 4, 5, and 7, and those are all student-facing articles. And so just as you flip through that, feel free to remember, but we're also inviting our principals to that. So we'll hear from our building principals and maybe a handful of programmatic people. But we've separated it so things like facilities and transportation, that's another night, and they'll join us on those nights to just go over different pieces of the budget. Any questions you have along the way, feel free to email me. I also extend that invitation to the public. Feel free to let us know, and yeah, certainly go ahead.
Are there any members of the public that wanted to speak on anything tonight? No. Okay. Member Bowden?
So you said the principals are coming to the next meeting. Is this where they share their bright spots with us? Could they also share with us, like what they're struggling with too this time? Yeah, just because I feel like I
They're already
love-
prepared to share things that they're struggling with and wish they could have.
Okay, because I love to hear their bright spots. That's great, but I also want to hear like what's not working for them. So, thank you.
Is there a motion to enter into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056A?
So moved.
Moved by member Hurd, seconded by member Bowden. All in favor? School committee's in executive session at